Hi, my name's Natalie and I work for the Christian charity Jubilee Plus. It's great to be joining you for this event. I used to be a journalist. My background is in print media, and so I've been asked to speak today about engaging with the media, and I just want to share with you a few thoughts, some simple tips for proactively engaging with the media, particularly in your community. And this is stuff you can do no matter what size church or organisation you are, whether you're really small and just starting out, or whether you're really large and been going for years. I'm hoping that some of these simple tips will help you and equip you to be able to engage with your local media in particular, but also regional and further afield. One of the issues I think we have is that journalists can be viewed as the enemy. Journalists are among the least trusted professionals in our nation. Actually, for me though, that gives us as Christians a huge opportunity to not view journalists with the same suspicion that society might view them with, but to actually want to build relationships with them, to want to bless them. A lot of the reasons that journalists aren't well thought of is to do with the fact that they don't always do what you want. They don't always print the story you want. They sometimes print the stories you don't want or broadcast them. And so that can lead to a sense of distrust. But actually, I believe that often that's just because we haven't built healthy relationships with local journalists, with regional journalists and beyond. Actually, journalists and the media are gatekeepers between us and our communities, between us and the public with whom we want to communicate. So it's not just for their blessing, but it's also in our interest to build good, healthy, proactive relationships. But for me, it's more about how can we serve journalists well, while at the same time maximising coverage of our activities and our events. Obviously, we've just got 15 minutes to dig into this, so I just want to share with you as quickly as possible some of my top tips that just hopefully give you a starting place if you're new to this. First of all, I think we should ask the question, what do the journalists around me, what do the reporters, what do the media, what do they want? Because so often our starting place can be, what do I want from them? I want my event to be publicised. I want our latest alpha course or some activity that we're running to be publicised, to be broadcast, to be printed, to be put online. And often our starting place is thinking, what do I want? What do I need from them? But I think as Christians, we have an opportunity to flip that on its head and to actually ask, what do they want? What would serve them well? What would they be interested in? And actually, the only real way to find that out is by having conversations. When I started working for my local church, one of the things I did was I called up a couple of the local newspapers, local radio station in particular, some of the regional TV I emailed rather than called, and just said, what sort of stories are of interest to you? What would you like to hear about from us? What sort of things appeal to you? Because it's about remembering that we've actually got two audiences when we seek to engage with the public around us, those who haven't walked through our doors, those who haven't come to a meeting or haven't joined us online or haven't engaged with any of our activities. So they're the audience we're trying to reach, but we need to go through this gatekeeper, the second audience, which is the reporter or the journalist themselves. And I think that's about remembering they're not actually there for us. They've got a job to do, and it's not about publicising, it's not about giving free publicity to our events, our activities. They are there to report on things that they believe that the community around them or the readership or the viewership will be interested in. So what can we do to serve them? What can we do to ask them, what do you want? What are you actually interested in? I'll give you a practical example of this. One of my local newspapers isn't that interested in local church baptises people. They're like, isn't that just what you do all the time? Why is that news? Now, we might be really interested and we might celebrate and think that there's something so exciting to tell when we baptise people in our congregations. They're highlights for us, aren't they? When we get the privilege of doing that, hearing people's testimonies about why they're getting baptised, that's something that's hugely exciting to us. But a reporter was saying to me, why is that interesting to anyone else though? Because isn't that just what churches do? don't churches baptise people? Isn't that just core business for you? So that was really eye-opening for me to just basically, they don't want to hear from us when we're baptising people because they just think that's normal life. That's not newsworthy. But the reporter did say to me, however, if you baptise people in the sea and you can send us a picture, that is more interesting to us. Now, I live in a coastal town, that's why it's of interest. But the point being that something that we think might be really interesting might not be. But if there's a slightly different angle on it, something slightly unusual about it. So baptisms in the sea with a picture of someone being baptised in the sea, they're like, that would be interesting to us. Equally, I was able to tell this reporter the story of one day in my church when we baptised a 9-year-old and a 90-year-old on the same occasion. He's like, great. That's a brilliant story. I love that. And again, if you've got a photo of the 90-year-old and the 9-year-old standing side by side that we can use with that, then we're going to print that and we're going to put the picture in. That's just an example of just how to think about, well, what do they actually want in a way that is interesting to them? Second tip is to learn your local media's deadlines. Again, phone them up or email them and ask them, when do you need stuff by? In my case, in Hastings, the main newspaper is weekly. So they go to print on a Thursday night. So the last thing they want from me is me calling them on a Thursday morning or a Thursday afternoon, possibly even not on a Wednesday afternoon, because that's when the real deadline pressure is on them. If I've got a story for them, they want to know about it, ideally, to be honest, on Friday afternoon when the papers come out Friday morning. So Friday morning, Friday afternoon, Monday, when there's a little bit less pressure on them. For radio, one of my local radio stations, obviously radio moves a lot quicker than a weekly newspaper. So actually, what time of day do they want stories? I know, for example, a news reporter on one of my regional radio stations is always on air from the moment the clock turns each hour till about 10 past the hour. So if I try and get in touch between, say, 1 o'clock and 10 past 1 or 2 o'clock and 10 past 2, that's just annoying for them because that's their prime slot when they're trying to do their core business of broadcasting. These are easy questions we can ask, and actually even taking the time to ask them will win us favour with journalists and with reporters. This might seem like a weird one, but asking them how they want to hear from you. I found that, again, it sounds so simple, but it can make all the difference. So I know of journalists who hate getting attachments in their emails. They find it clogs up their inbox. They don't have enough capacity for storing everything they're sent, so it can just be a real nightmare for them from time. So they've said to me, if you're going to send me something and you want to email it, can you just put it in the body of an email? Don't send it as an attachment. It's a weird thing, and it's a kind of quirk or a peculiarity of that particular journalist. Nevertheless, knowing that and then doing what they want is likely to win me favour with them and maximise the chance of the things I send them being picked up. Equally, we can assume the opposite. We can assume that radio and TV don't want photos from us, or don't want basically us to send pictures, because if it's for radio or TV, they're not going to use photos that we send them. Actually, with so much stuff being online, often they do want a picture from you as well. So my regional radio station is like, please, whenever you send us anything, can you send us a picture with it too, so we don't have to chase you for it. That means if we want to cover it either on our online platforms or we want to broadcast it, we don't have to come back to you unless we want to do an interview with you, because you've already sent us what we need. For me, that's really crucial as well. Making their lives as easy as possible. So send through everything they need. Don't send them a press release or something about an event you're running and leave out key information. Don't make them chase you. Give them everything you can imagine they need. When I write press releases, often I'd get someone else to read it, and the whole point of that is for them to read it and say, what do you want to know? What questions do you want to ask me when you've read it? You know, like, what time's your event? Something really basic as that, which sometimes just accidentally we can leave out. But obviously sometimes more probing questions, and that just helps me to think through, how can I serve the journalist that I'm sending this to better by filling out as much information as they need to save them the hassle of coming back to me if they don't need to. So that's really important too. Another thing that I think is vital is to think about, what is the hook? What is the angle? I've already spoken to it a little bit, but what's the thing that's going to draw people in? What's the thing that's going to make it interesting? So I talked about baptisms, but it's the same. You know, a lot of what we do as churches, if we send a press release saying we're holding a carol service, well, isn't every church? Most churches are probably doing that. Why is that interesting? Why? What's the hook? What's the thing? You know, a local newspaper or radio station might broadcast a list or publish a list of every carol service that's taking place, but what's going to make yours stand out? For me, it's things like looking in advance of the carol service. Maybe if you've got a particular musician who's coming to it, maybe if you've got a live donkey. These are actually things that may sound silly or daft to think, how would that generate more interest? But actually, if there are distinctives like that, if there are things that mean your event is set apart somehow from the norm, then those sorts of things are likely to get you more coverage. With things like a carol service, to be honest, I'd send a press release in advance telling them something interesting about it. I'd also send them a press release after the event telling them something interesting about it again, something different that's interesting about it. Like maybe we had more people turn up than we expected. Maybe you're in a small village and you had 100 people turn up for your carol service. Maybe it's the first year you've streamed it online. Maybe something went wrong and it was just something that was funny and you want to talk about that. Maybe you had live animals and that turned out to be a bit of a nightmare. Maybe you had a nativity with children and there was something funny about that you can tell without it being embarrassing to that child or that family, or you can get their permission to tell that story. And maybe think about, can you in your post-event press release send a picture as well, just so that, again, the reporter doesn't have to come back and ask you. When we're thinking about things like a hook, it's also the fact that, you know, thinking about, well, church runs carol service, church has baptisms, or even charity raises money. These things in and of themselves are normal and commonplace. So even with the charity raising money, is there something interesting about how you're doing it? Is there something unusual? Is there a photo opportunity? I used to work for a local council, and the local council was ranked very highly in one of the best local authorities to work for in the country. And when that story came out, they were rated that by, I think, the Times or the Telegraph. I think said they were the 14th best council out of 370 or 400 and something. They were ranked 14th as the 14th best council to work for. So that ended up having a piddly little piece in the local newspaper. It was about 3 sentences, and that was all it got. But actually, what I noticed as I turned up at that council for the first time was that their parking space right outside this beautiful old town hall council building happened to be the same number, 14, as they'd been ranked in the Times or the Telegraph as the best council to work for. So I was like, why didn't you get a photo of the leader of the council sitting in that parking space with the copy of the national newspaper open in front of them that showed that they were ranked that, and then the beautiful building in the background? That, I guarantee you, would have got printed. They might have still only got 3 or 4 sentences, but with a nice picture that would have drawn people's attention to it. For me, one of the biggest things for us as we think about, as churches, as Christians, how we engage, is thinking about, what is your key message? Actually, don't just send everything you can think of to the local reporters, but equally don't shy away from that and don't think I won't send them anything. But what's your key message? If your key message is, this is a church that really cares about the local community, then make sure everything you send to them backs up that message. Think about that, have that in your thinking as you're sending them stuff, and let them know this is our thing. We're a church that cares about the community. That's why we're going to send you articles that show you how we're doing that in practical terms, that demonstrate that this is what we're about as a church, and let everything you send them back that up, so that they come to know you, come to think of you as someone who cares about your community, if that is what you want them to think about you. I hope some of these things have been helpful. It's just scratching the surface, it's just where to start, but I really hope there's some things you can take away there and put into practice.